Hello, everybody. Welcome to Ye Olde Lang Team meeting. Let me share my screen. I don't know why Ye Olde. So let's see. Oh, you know what I didn't do? Look at I think we got all the action items from last week taken care of. I didn't do that. I didn't copy that list in the pre. Any of these things not? Let's see. We did this. Open a bug. Okay, I didn't do that. Whoever has background noise might want to mute. So we have. This is still happening. We have a couple. I think we have two main things. We'll go through the triage, I guess, and then we'll figure it out. Anything else on this list that didn't happen? Conflict around function pointers I wrote, and then I wrote it way too late, but that's okay. Did you write a comment approving 63909? I guess we're going to talk about that, Josh.
I was about to, and then found that I wasn't sure we actually had consensus, and so I feel like we need to revisit that.
All right, so let's just move in. P-high issues, brief update. We have this problem we've discussed in the past around trade objects. I kind of worked out a series of mentoring steps, and I'm trying to find someone to mentor and or do it myself. I think I found a few candidates, so that's all there really is to say there. Progressing slowly. It's been a bug since ROS 1.0, I guess. Okay. The nominated PRs. So there's a PR warn if include macro. Apparently, the include macro reads in the contents of a file and parses the first expression and then discards the rest of the file. This is potentially surprising and probably not the behavior anyone actually expects. And right now it doesn't do anything. This PR as written, as described, gives a warning if there are extra tokens in the file. As actually written, aborts compilation if there are extra tokens in the file, and thus makes a breaking change. And the question is, what behavior do we expect to do? I wrote down what I think are probably the three reasonable choices. Warning and preserving the current behavior for better or worse, probably worse. Erroring, and maybe through a future compatibility warning if we're nervous. Or do a more extensive rewrite where we actually parse all the tokens and try to interpret this as a sequence of expressions rather than an individual expression. That sounds kind of hard. I think we could probably scratch that off the list as not worth the effort.
Is it hard or is it just not the current behavior?
It's hard. You'd have to refactor the parser. I mean, I guess, not the parser, sorry, the macro expander. I don't know, maybe it's not too hard. I thought I was thinking about it wrong, actually, I realize now.
I mean, if it's doable, that seems like a very defensible choice here. If you say include other file, it seems shocking to me that it doesn't include the entire other file.
It raises some questions about like I think the way to do it would be that they expand to a block that contains them, which raises questions about like temporary lifetimes and other interactions. So it might be easier to just not accept it and then have the other people have the actual author put the block in explicitly that they would have to do. But it's syntactically, it's in a macro position, so it's like it is an expression in our AST, and we would want to replace it with an expression, not.
I always kind of assumed it was intentionally hygienic, and that it just effectively expanded the tokens in directly where you put it. Yeah. Nothing added, nothing removed.
That would be harder. We could plausibly do that. But we'll be on
that. Okay.
Not how macros work. So, any strong opinions about this? People are coming to us for guidance.
I'd be in favor of future compatibility warning style.
I think that's where I lean as well if we're at all nervous about. I mean, I guess one other thing is create or run and then decide.
So future compatibility warning implies we will error in the future, but that we are politely not erroring today to avoid breaking people?
Yes,
I can live
essentially.
with that.
Yeah, it's a special warning, which has some questions of its own, mostly that we need to adjust. I think we need to adjust our process to not lose track of these. But
Yeah.
that's a separate issue. There's already plenty.
It would be nice if they were automated to the point of this becomes an error in this release.
Yes, it would be nice. This, I think we were waiting on FCP, but I checked my box. So this one, okay, enough on that. New lines. Oh, who's going to leave a message? Somebody should leave a message. I nominate Felix. But
Okay.
All right, fine, good. Do the one who foolishly.
It won't happen tonight. It won't happen tonight. It'll have to wait till tomorrow, but at least, yeah.
So there is an include stir macro. It does not normalize new lines. This proposal is to make it normalize new lines in compatibility with string constants. Last time we talked about this, we mentioned RFC. There was some mild pushback that this seemed like overkill. We did the string constants and nobody complained. So Petroshenkov mentioned something about a mini RFC that at least sort of specifies the behavior around byte order markers and other weirdness that you want to think about. And that seems like a pretty minimal good thing to have. I agree. How hard do we want to push for RFC? Or I don't know.
I feel like I don't care if this is a full RFC. I do think it should have its behavior clearly documented in terms of not just new lines, but yes, does it strip Unicode byte order marks or not? How does it handle encodings?
So an in-between point would be an FCP merge with a clear write-up that covers these points. That's pretty standard procedure. And let the final comment period go, so people have a chance to see it this week in Rust and all that. Should we just run for that?
And it's already tagged release notes.
Right.
Okay, I could write that up if you think that the appropriate thing to do is RFC bot merge and a concern for please document.
Yes, that's what I think. I was going to order it in a slightly different way, but it seems fine.
Okay. How would you like to do that?
Oh, I don't really care. What I meant was I would have said, you write the spec, and then I will merge it. And then we will do an FCP merge with the spec in line. However,
okay. That's fine.
But I don't think it matters one way or the other. We'll get there.
Okay.
Okay. Seems good. So nominated issues. So no unwind. Let's talk about that. There is a whole ongoing saga. I guess we can skip most of that. And Josh, can you bring us up to date on what are the questions we should decide today? What's the latest in the thread? And
yeah. So the consensus in our previous meeting was that the state that we're in is kind of unfortunate. We reverted the abort on unwind out of an extern function in order to avoid breaking people's current usage. But that then means there is a real possibility of miscompilation if you do use that behavior, because we still tag functions as no unwind. So the consensus from the previous meeting was, hey, we should either abort and tag things no unwind, or don't abort and don't tag things no unwind. We all kind of felt regret that the RFC wasn't going to make it in time, but that we don't want to wait on the RFC in order, or one of the RFCs, before fixing the problem. And so the consensus at that time was, let's merge Ralph's PR. That said, there was a lot of further discussion in Thrash on Discord and a half dozen issue threads since then. And I would like to double check and make sure that nobody is especially considering it a problem if we merge this. And in particular, I don't think we want to wait 10 days to merge this.
But one thing I know Essential mentioned in the compiler team meeting that they said they had a change of heart. They didn't specify about what exactly. I know that I personally, along with it sounds like you, Josh, and I think Central as well, feel differently about what the RFC should contain, and that I'm now pretty persuaded the right thing is to add an ABI and not to have an attribute, which we could talk about. I don't know whether they meant that or whether they meant something about this.
Central actually had two changes of hearts, and I can try to quickly represent their position here. One was moving from hash unwind attribute to the ABI, as long as we don't establish a subtyping relationship there, which I'm in complete agreement with.
Yes. Okay. And what was the other?
The other was, and I will acknowledge here, I am conveying a point of view that I don't agree with, but I'm attempting to convey it as accurately as possible. Central felt that he would rather leave the undefined behavior in place for a while longer, because if we just drop no unwind so that we're in a consistent state, it removes the impetus to actually do something, and we've spent years not doing something. So he wanted to leave the UB in place to motivate people to make a real RFC fix. I personally disagree with that point of view, but I want to accurately convey that point of view since he's not here.
So I have some sensitivity to that. I would say the reasons that I can think of not to land this PR are two. And one would be the lessening of the desire to make the change. I think that's probably pretty small because it seems like we're in flight there. The other would
Can I make a request that since on my knowledge, there's two different PRs, I believe, that are tangled here. So
yes,
let
me be more clear. Reasons to make it continue to be UB to unwind through a C boundary, and which is 6909, I think. The other reason would just be that it sends if you're not paying very close attention and all you see is that we made it non-UB, you might get the wrong message. Like, our goal is that it should be UB eventually, so it's sort of confusing that we take this backward step instead of saying, well, we leave the status quo where it's been since 1.0 of it's technically UB. As it happens, there seem to be some people who are doing it and getting away with it because UB is not defined to do anything in particular, not necessarily anything bad. That I could see that. I don't have a strong opinion about it, but I think it's a reasonable point of view. I think in the end of the day, probably no one, it feels like a sort of moot discussion, but it doesn't matter that much one way or the other. I remember Scott's main position last time was basically they were fine as long as we made it clear that we intended for it to be UB again, which I guess goes towards the second point about mixed messaging. Does anyone who's in this meeting now have an opinion?
So if nobody else I wanted to give a minute there, but if nobody else has a strong opinion on this, I personally feel slightly the opposite, that it would actually add more impetus to get an RFC done if we do land 63909, because it means we are missing out on an optimization opportunity, and getting that optimization opportunity back would then require us to get a proper solution for this. So I actually feel we should land and beta nominate 63909 now, and then we should continue to work on RFC 2753, which is mostly making forward progress.
I think you have making a strong point, actually. I'm fine with landing it personally. If you want to write up the summary and make that case, it seems okay with me. It seems like Central is the main objector, and they're not here, so
Okay.
they may find
I
that
will
places.
file the FCP then, and if anyone wants to raise a concern, then they are welcome to do so.
All right.
One other request before we move on from that one. Does anyone feel that we actually need to wait the full 10 days if we reach consensus? Or can we just hit the merge button on this if we reach consensus?
I don't think we need to wait. Like the people who are going to comment are following pretty closely.
I mean, there's a difference between waiting 10 days and there's a gradient here, right? I mean, you didn't hear an option for like wait some amount of time, but not the full 10 days.
It's going to be a while till we check those boxes. Sad fact of the matter is, usually the waiting. I feel like that's just a general problem with our system, that by the time the boxes get checked, it's usually a long time. If they were getting checked the way we originally imagined, which was like very fast, then
in practice, we are not going to all check our boxes and quickly merge this before everyone has a chance to at least see it and raise a concern if they want. It will take a few days.
Yeah, I don't mind as long as we make it clear that's what's going to happen when all boxes are. Just make sure you post that, it's not going to go through the standard waiting time, I guess.
Yeah, that sounds good. One last question that came up in the compiler team meeting is, how strongly do we feel about backporting this? I personally don't think it matters if we backport it, but
I think we beta nominated the removal of the abort, so I think consistency would be nice. Then again, we also did a release with that removal of the abort, and we're not backporting it to a stable release. I certainly don't think we should do a point release over this. That would be ridiculous.
So I guess I would say backport if desired but not necessary is reasonable. If it's easy, we're not going to bend over backwards to do it. One thing I would
think
say,
the timeline and the timeline for the next release is close enough that I don't know how much people care about that in terms of making these decisions, but I'm personally think there's enough other things that are breathing down my neck for the next release that that's the reason I would say let's not backport. Right,
that's what I was kind of getting at. The only thing I would also add is, Josh, in your write-up, I think making it clear that that's a good write-up that you may want to post in the release notes or something. So, they should have some text that makes clear the future plans to make this UB again. I kind of feel like whether it's backward or not isn't that important. It's been around since 1.0, as I said. It's more about declaring our intentions. But I don't care. I wouldn't be opposed if we can make it work. So this resolve on sound interaction, I cleared the nomination. We talked about that before. I'm moving on. Do we want to talk more about unwinding, or do we? We didn't quite resolve the backporting question for this.
I worried that I'm about to reopen this issue that we just attempted to close or are finished with, but I want to make sure I understood what you just said, Nico, about this is becoming undefined behavior again in the future. The way I understood Josh's motivation for saying why we could land Ralph's thing was to say, oh, it's actually could still act as an impetus for fixing things properly, because landing Ralph's thing will be a pessimization of sorts. It'll cause some code that could hypothetically be optimized to miss that optimization, and so they'll push an RFC forward that'll bring that optimization back. But what I heard you just say was we plan to bring the undefined behavior back in the future, which indeed could be the case in terms of the optimization that we put in place.
I think
could reintroduce undefined behavior, but
I think the right way to phrase this is actually, I think I was being imprecise. Like UB is itself an imprecise term. Basically, it continues to be UB from Rust's perspective. However, the current compilation step, like from LLVM's, we're removing the UB from LLVM's perspective, and we are saying that in the future it will be defined as an abort, which is sort of a subset of today's possible legal behaviors, and there will be an alternative way. So the bottom line is we are planning, unless something changes, to break people who are relying on unwinding, and we're planning to break them in a hard, visible way. We've just been putting it off until we have something for them to migrate to. And that's
Right.
That's what we want to make clear.
But that is not us reintroducing UB. That is actually us producing a cleaner solution in the future, but it will require migration.
Right. And this is why I don't know how we want to phrase it exactly, but this is why I was distinguishing Rust UB sort of from LLVM UB. Maybe I think it's probably clearer to not get into all that, but just to say, this is the plan. At present, you are allowed to unwind. Like at present, we are on sufferance allowing unwinding, but it is expected to change when there's an alternative path available.
Yeah, I just got this impression of us like sort of limping along, being like we're defining to be like the spec says it's undefined behavior, but we're going to keep sort of supporting this use case and doing slight somersaults to continue supporting it while stating our intentions long term are to stop doing such somersaults. Well, I guess is exactly what Central is saying about not wanting to land, Ralph's patch about.
Oh,
yeah. Okay. This is the debate, and I don't want to reopen it. So okay, I said my piece on video. I'll be quiet now.
It is exactly the debate, and I think both sides are reasonable. Okay. Okay. Sorry, looking at the clock. I think we're doing okay. I want to talk a little bit about grammar stuff because Junex is here. Becky, we have time for that. So ref parameter. So I took off the nomination around self-referential generators because it seemed like in our last discussion with Ralph, we agreed we were not going to change anything in the short term and identified a viable path forward for the longer term that will probably need to be refined, but no reason to panic. There is this other bug. Ref parameter incorrectly decorated with no alias attribute. What's happening here is if you have blah, 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 something like this, I think. Basically, we currently decorate shared references, yeah, like that, with no, we currently decorate shared references with the no alias parameter, with the no alias attribute in LLVM. And because the idea is, although there may be other references to the same memory, only reads are allowed and they don't interfere with this. So from LLVM's definition, that's no alias. However, this is not necessarily correct around RefCells. And in particular, how does this work? Yeah, oh, sorry, I have this wrong. And this actually gets back to one of the first problems we discovered around ref. In particular, ref currently embeds a shared reference inside of it. So this is a struct that contains a shared reference. And that shared reference is marked as no alias. And the problem is LLVM interprets that as meaning no alias for the entire function. But once you drop the ref, now you actually regain mutable access to that memory through the ref cell. Like if X and Y are both pointing, Y is pointing at the contents of this ref cell that X points at. Now we actually can mutate Y. And that could confuse LLVM, which might think that loads of Y could be moved down past the drop and stuff like that. And this is actually exactly the same problem that refs, we sort of first encountered a long time ago when we were exploring other versions of Ralph's rules. Basically that ref says it has a shared reference with lifetime tick A, but actually it has a shared reference with a smaller lifetime because it's the dynamic point where the drop occurs is actually when the lifetime of that reference ends. And it might be shorter than the static tick A, which is over approximation. Actually, that reminds me that we could do so there's two problems here. We could do a targeted fix on ref. We could change ref to use star const instead of ampersand AT, and everything's fine. Basically, because now we are no longer promising that we have a reference with lifetime decay, which is a lie. But more generally, like, there's this question of what if someone had written RefCell themselves, and would it be allowed? Which I guess we can defer a little bit. I think one other option would be that we could just be more conservative in how we use the no alias attribute, and sort of say, like, it's still okay to put no alias. If you have something like this, like if the ref is at the top level, then it can be considered no alias, but not when it gets embedded in structs and things where it becomes less clear. And then we'd have to decide what those rules are. This also comes back to Ralph's aliasing rules, because no alias has an analogous thing in the stack borrows called I forget what Ralph called them, but these function barriers. I don't think we're going to reach this whole, we're not going to go into super detail on this question. I can decide what the right long-term behavior is right now, but it's good to A, bring up the subject, and B, like, ask how urgent we consider this to be at least addressed in the case of ref. I kind of feel like we should just change ref to use star const at least. But
it seems like a reasonable fix.
I think that essentially fixes the problem for anybody except people who wrote their own ref cells who may have similar problems with their own.
I mean, if they do, then that seems like we should just document that refs have this behavior and that you need to use raw pointers if you are both aliasing and writing.
Right. Well, yeah, that kind of circles back to the fact that our aliasing rules are not well defined. We need to define them.
True statement.
Make the transition. But
can someone write a ref cell that doesn't use unsafe code that hits this problem, or is it only when you use unsafe code you're going to hit this anyway?
You'd have to write unsafe code because you have to use unsafe cell.
I'm just making sure. You
have to build on cell or ref cell. And there may be an analogous problem with mutexes, but let's assume we fix it consistently. Then you'd have to build on cell or ref cell, and so.
I'm in favor of changing ref in the short term as long as we, yeah.
Yeah, I think that should be that seems like the right course. Change ref now. Document that we probably need to we need to decide if this is right. You should be allowed, if you should have to use star const or not to accommodate this kind of pattern where you're.
Make sure we write a blog post somewhere explaining this and, point people to it perhaps. For those who
I'm pretty sure Ralph will keep it. I'm just assuming when Ralph comes back from vacation, he's gonna roll this in to his series of posts and stuff. But yeah. Okay, sounds reasonable.
But in this case, this particular bug, Ralph was able to exhibit it without using Miri, right? I'm not sure. I didn't read it carefully enough, I suppose.
I don't. Doesn't appear that anybody posted I don't know if somebody posted a weaponized variant that did something that actually optimized in a bad way. There are I saw a few examples scroll by. I didn't look close. They weren't obviously labeled as. I mean, the other option would be to change our no alias rules to be more conservative today and just sort of like we just were talking about for 63909. So maybe we'll put them back later, but at the moment we're gonna make it not UB to do this, not LVM UB.
It does indeed seem like there might be some sort of policy we need to define here to consistently guide our behavior as a team.
Okay, I don't feel it's urgent to reach a conclusion at this moment. We could sit on it for a little bit. It feels like a sort of subtle question. But, like this is another of those bugs that's been in there since 1.0. As far as I know, we've pretty much been doing this. That said, I sort of like the policy of making it clear where we expect to change, making it clear the thing places where we're refining rules, but in the meantime, not leaving it up to the whim of the LLVM optimizer. And in particular, if we can come back with some dynamic checks in the future that will help people to migrate. But it does give us some risk that we'll get locked in. That risk exists kind of either way. All right. I'm just going to write a comment summarizing the conversation and not stating a conclusion. How does that sound? I think we'll start with that. Should we try to formalize a policy about these kind of issues? Or is that just like it's better to deal with them in the specific than in the abstract?
Yeah, well, it's a question about whether we like sort of relitigate our overall philosophy on each one and let people sort of pet interests guide them.
Right, it gets pretty tiring.
Or are we gonna try to have like a kind of constitutional article saying this is our general approach,
right?
And let our Supreme Court litigate in the future.
I think I'd prefer a rule of thumb that's like, unless there are compelling reasons otherwise, we will generally take this approach. But all right, I don't think we have full quorum to debate a general rule yet, so we'll keep going. I didn't look at these bugs yet. That's incorrect undefined behavior on static references created from pointers. I don't know. Taylor, you didn't remember what's going on here. I see you commented. Is there a decision for us to make? I'm just going to leave this until someone has time to read it and give a good summary. I think we may have discussed this regression. We cannot determine resolution for the attribute macro test. Yeah, we discussed this. We proposed to close it. Oh, right. I think we're basically done. I'm going to resolve my concern and I'll move on. Even though I don't remember. I remember reading what Petroshenkov and thinking that it's made sense. Okay. Non-exhaustive, I don't think we can talk about without central. So, anything left here? We did discuss unwind. This, I think, is an RFC FCP situation. Maybe not. Yes. Blocked unchecked boxes from Felix, Scott, as well as various concerns. I'm just going to bring that to everyone's attention. Config accessible inversion. Whatever happened with this? I guess that's the question. I think I will defer this till Central's here. That reminds me. Yeah, okay, good. So maybe we're moving into FCP now or something.
You're talking about 25, 23?
Yeah.
I think we are in, like,
Proposed final comment period. It looks like the bot is kind of stuck.
yeah, something along those lines.
All right, so someone should try to unstick the bot. Who manages that bot? I'll figure it out and pester them. Or try to figure out if there's...
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I hear you, whoever's talking.
Oh, yay! That's Taylor. I've been trying to talk for a little while now, and I didn't realize you couldn't hear me that whole time.
Sorry.
That makes sense now why when you asked me about the undefined behavior on static references created from pointers thing and I started answering, you started talking over me.
I was like, right, I'm just talking to myself here. Okay, go on, yes.
No, okay, got it. Yeah, I was just saying on the CFG accessible thing that the bot is stalled out, but it should have gone into FCP.
All right, I'll figure it out.
You know what I wonder if it is? NRC posted a concern, and then I believe NRC also resolved that concern. And I think in between posting and resolving that concern, NRC stopped being a team member.
It's probably...
I'm wondering if that's a corner case that we never fixed.
Sounds quite plausible. I think I've been meaning to either write a PR or request someone to write a PR that lets anybody resolve a concern, like not just the person who posted it. But
it should at least be anybody on the team should be able to resolve a concern.
yeah, that's what I mean. Anyone who can tell
also,
RFC.
the person who originally filed a concern should be able to post to resolve a concern.
Right.
Well, I will see if I can actually unstick that concern, and if not, then we'll have to figure out another way to do it.
If we just ping the, yeah. If not, we'll ping somebody. Pietro will probably know who to ping. If not,
They would take it out of SCP and then redo it and recheck all the boxes.
it's also an option.
Let me try doing this because nobody tried doing resolved on behalf of NRC.
I don't think that works, but in any case, just want to bring up custom self types. We moved to postpone it last time. There's a few unchecked boxes here. Josh, Felix, Scott. 2 of you are here today. I guess
Right. I think the reason my boxes weren't checked here was that this trick tipped my pattern match for, oh, this is funky type system stuff. I should not just blindly check a box when I don't fully understand.
Well, the TLDR of this was we stabilized certain special cases and we're postponing resolving the general case because it's complicated. I don't think the RFC was up to date on all the complications.
I remember a while back I thought that we accepted several common cases and then punted the general case, including raw pointers. Is
Yes.
that what? Oh, I see. And this RFC is those cases. Okay.
Yes, exactly. Now, that said, Taylor, you had an issue, and so did Boats, to extend to a few more cases. I don't know where that didn't show up in my list, but maybe not.
I remember there was one for pin of self.
I mean, I'm gonna write up an FTP comment and we can talk about it there because me saying it in this meeting is just gonna be me saying what's gonna be in that comment. So.
I think it's better to wait. I'm just mentioning you may want to nominate it. All right.
But yeah, I mean, when we talked before, like basically the original stabilization included customer nested receivers, and then when both went to actually do it, they were like, oh, actually I've removed custom receivers or nested receivers, and nobody had asked for it to be removed, and so it just like didn't get included in the stabilization because it was more stuff than was necessary, but there's no like problem with them.
Yes, I remember. All right, so we're at the end of our agenda. I don't know, Douglas, did you want to talk about the parser working group, or do you want to do that a different day when more
Do
people
we have a new name?
Woo!
Yeah, usually it's WG grammar.
Oh, you're right. I knew that.
Well, we don't have a lot of updates on our front. Like we had the summer, which was slow as usual. But essentially, we have Eddie moving from a generated code generation style implementation for GLL and going with grammar, which is kind of like an interpreter for the proposal that we have for our grammar.
Can you back up a little bit? I don't think we've ever talked
Yeah,
about
we never had.
the like overall approach and
Oh,
stuff.
yeah, that's true.
And I'm actually
So
don't
is
really
that
remember, so I wouldn't mind.
yeah, so stepping a lot back, we started this grammar group to try to specify the language, in the sense that we have a grammar where the lang team or whatever other person that wants to propose a change will be able to validate if this thing is going to break or not, the language grammar. Also, this kind of extended into making sure that we have ways to compare with whatever Rust Analyzer is doing, or even Rust C is doing, like making sure that our grammar actually can check between the others and make sure that we are consistent. So it's kind of like, eventually we want to have this to be like the specification in a long, long run. If this is going to be generating parsers or not for the compiler, I don't think that's going to happen, but it was one of the ideas that were circulated in the past. Apart from this, we started moving. There was some discussion. We settled for using GLL initially, which is the project that Eddie did via his Lycan group. GLL was like heavily using code generation for make things happen. It's kind of like, it was very fast, but on the other hand, it was kind of like crazy to deal with. And after some time, they decided that it would be better to do like an interpreted version. In the meantime, the whole WG grammar has like the grammar itself, which is defined on this language that we are kind of creating for the grammar, which is a mix of EB and F plus some niceties. We have also, yeah, it's a lot of information. We also have
Say more about that.
the.
What is that? There's like a grammar. So is there like a repo where the current?
Oh yeah, there's a repo. Rust lang WG grammar.
Got it. Load it up.
See. Yeah.
So in here, there's like a grammar or something.
If you go into the grammar on the folder grammar, you're going to see part of the constructs. Just take a look at something so you can get like a feel on how this works.
Okay.
Yeah, you just went for the ABI, of course.
Interesting one.
Yeah. So yeah, we have some sort of language to define the grammar. And this was like the thing that we came up with being the most comfortable one that we could use. Also, there's the Rust C code is actually being checked out, and we are running this grammar and parsing the whole repository to make sure that we have like a better idea. So essentially, we have now a test harness that goes over all the grammar. And we also have more contributors helping. We have eHus and CAD97 helping. CAD was working on some of the changes for the grammar, like for example, being able to add more functionality like separators and optional stuff. CAD97. Yeah. Also, we have eHus working on like, okay, so let's formalize whatever we are talking. So they did a bunch of issues on the repo that you probably can see on the grammar repo. Like there's a bunch of concerns and how we are going to define this, how we're going to deal with that. So essentially we have like a bunch of questions that we're tackling slowly. You're muted.
So I am. Thank you. So I think this is like awesome. A couple questions I have. I think when sort of like the unsafe code guidelines, we're lacking like a good steady feedback process where, like, I would imagine that what would happen is you would be working through a lot of stuff, and then you would encounter some questionable stuff, like here's some, yeah, here are two possible parses. Rusty currently does this. It seems a little weird, maybe not what we actually want. The grammar does that. Maybe we want to surface that to a broader discussion and get more feedback. Have you run into that sort of situation, or you're not kind of?
So essentially, we are like on that, you know, the bootstrapping problem. We kind of have to have the bare minimum working to a point where we're making progress towards the goal, but we are not near a point where we can actually come and start showing it more in a more practical way. Sure, it's always good to give you feedback to the Lang team, and this is something that we should start doing now, which is actually great to actually discuss these things with y'all. I met with Taylor at RustConf and mentioned like, I need to find a way of involving the language team more, being like, we have Central, which is always present and helping, but you know, Central is not the language team. We need more people to actually be aware of what's going on.
How does this relate to the grammar in the reference?
Like, that's kind of like the end goal.
Right. But so there is like, I'm just wondering if you're actively comparing it against the reference in any way, or I guess not there yet. Yeah.
Not yet, but yeah, that's clearly part of the goal. We want to be able to actually generate the reference in the future or something like this. It's kind of like getting that corpus of information that we have today that people actually worked and discussed at the edge cases to actually being able to put this into the grammar.
Okay. Have you encountered places where, like, GLL produces a, you know, series of possible parses? I know disambiguation.
Yeah, so essentially, Eddie started another crate called Grammar that is simpler than GLL. And now they were working on the disambiguation, literally. That was the next step.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's my update on the wall. On the whole, the project moves on a very slow but steady pace.
In terms of more interaction with the Lang team, let's talk about that. What would you like? Like what I
technically Eddie B is on the Lang team, right?
Essentially, sorry?
I said technically Eddie B is on the Lang team, so you've got two Lang team members already.
No, that's my point. But essentially, we're just chatting randomly on a Discord channel, and I, as one of the leads on that team, failed to post frequent updates to internals because, of course, we are just there, we are talking, and Century is there, Eddie is there, but it's kind of like we never came to a meeting and actually had this as part of the agenda. You know, so it's kind of like increasing the transparency, let's say.
Yeah, I think posting to internals might not get too noticed anyway, but I would, I mean, at least not by us. Look at those by people, but hard to keep up. Like one thing we could do is certainly, I could ping you and try to get just a short update if anything happened. It's totally fine if the answer is like, did more stuff.
Yeah, I know that. I know that we move more slowly than the other WGs because basically everyone that is working on this is working on something else at the same time. So
yeah,
you have limited attention span from everyone.
Do you want to try to do some kind of regular updates and see if it feels like it's useful?
I would say that we just talking and putting this on the agenda is a great first step, and we should just do this more often. We don't necessarily need to do a cadence, but at least I'll try to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think what we'll do is this. I'll put on the main agenda document, which needs to be reorganized anyway. I'm going to list it and list the last time we talked. Every once in a while, we can look and be like, it's been a while. Let's do another one. And if you ever feel like something exciting happens, of course, you can let me know.
Yeah, because maybe when we show things, the collective hive mind has better ideas. So why not?
I'd also love to see just, if you have cool demos, got something parsing with a nifty little thing.
Right now, if you want to see something parsing and things, you probably can take a look on the Triage CI, which is another discussion, because essentially we're like parsing the entire source Rust sources, and this is taking like some time, and we had like an evolution on time. Another sub project that was there, but again, way too many things in flight to tackle is like, actually, let's try how long we take to parse this and how reasonable it is, like, because if the parser is way too slow, what's the point? But then we're like, no, we're not building a parser, we are building the language specification. So let's step back a little bit and focus on what is more important.
Cool.
I
So
think that's it
you
for
are
me.
able to parse the whole REST repository though, even in some way.
Yes, in some way. At least we can say that we couldn't parse this at all. We could parse some of it. So there's some levels where we can track how far we are into this.
Interesting.
Let me get you some.
You have like a percentage or something.
Yeah, I need to remember where is this because I never looked at it again. Okay, let me see how can I send some this. Cool, paste doesn't work here. Okay, I'm going to give you a link later. But essentially, out of 100K Rust files, we parsed 878. 10,000, 878 was like unambiguously. 10,000 was ambiguously. 196 partially, and 51 didn't parse at all. But kind of like.
Not add up at all unless I missed something.
I mean,
51 didn't parse at all. 51 files?
Yeah, and this is what we want to figure out, if these are like just the broken files that we put inside the repo.
This is out of 100K files?
Yes.
Isn't this like not even close to 100K? Or maybe I didn't understand. Maybe there's like thousands at the end of these.
Oh, sorry, 11K. 11K. Yeah.
Okay.
I can't do math apparently.
That sounds a little more correct. I was going to say missing like 90,000 files.
Yeah, you can actually go into the last Travis build, scroll to the bottom, and you're going to get the exact numbers.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty cool actually. That's nice. Okay.
So essentially the test harness goes and runs. I probably should bump the rustc repo because we took like a snapshot on time.
Yeah. Are you kind of just trying to work down through those things and get them down to?
Yep.
That's very cool.
So the whole idea is that we are going to eventually start reduce the ambiguous name, the ambiguous number of files, and actually have like ways. Once we disambiguate, that goes away, so it gets better.
Any last comments? We're running out of time.
I think that's it from me. From the others?
All right.
This is super cool. The Travis thing is actually very cool to look at.
Yeah, it's neat. I guess I'll have one last question. Are you looking for more people? Would that be something you're interested in? Or do you have enough people you just need time?
I think that we need time, but yeah, it's always more is merry. The thing is, I really want to make sure that we have a good way of mentor and channel this new help into like things. And one of the challenges that we are still like stuck on the disambiguation part and waiting on Eddie.
You mean like you don't have a good mechanism for specifying disambiguation?
Essentially, the challenge is like, how do you define a sane API for this?
Besides
like
rewriting your grammar itself?
Yes.
Yeah, okay,
You know?
just making sure I understand.
Because that's usually what we do. We just go on any other kind of grammar, you just go and say, yeah, whatever, I'm just going to rewrite it until it passes.
Yep, that's hard.
we kind of want to be like more human friendly than ENF and LALR grammars in general.
Yeah.
Have you looked into the research in this area? I'm assuming there's got to be
A
some.
ton. There's a ton, like a bunch of papers, and on the GLL repo, there's like one issue that is specifically documentation, whereas like they're all links to research papers on the topic, like how to parse, what we can do better, etc. Yeah, we look at over them and kind of like ended up, because one of the candidates at the time was to just use LALR pop and potentially put GLL as a backend for LALR pop, but just went nowhere. And we kind of ended up with this grammar format, and it's kind of nice. It's kind of neat.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I mean, the plus side would be that the answer to this question would be clearer. The downside would be that the answer would be use LR1, which is like not necessarily the most human-friendly form of disambiguation. So, all right. So I guess you could say yes, if there were people, especially like, grammar nerds or someone who enjoys and wants to hack on that stuff.
we have a bunch of people that just drive by on the grammar channel and actually drop some interesting comments. But yeah, it will be. It's always nice to have more people.
Maybe there's some PhD student watching who's like, but I'm doing research on disambiguation in GLL grammars. If so, if you're watching, come now. All right, cool. Then let's call it. Thanks, everybody. Any last things for the meeting in general? We got our work items. Go to bed, Felix. All right.
Bye-bye.